The silence in our house had become a physical thing, a third presence that lived and breathed in the spaces between Mark and me. It wasn't a hostile silence, not at first. It was the quiet of two people who had finished reading the same book but kept it on the coffee table out of habit. We moved through our beautiful home with its tasteful gray walls and stainless steel appliances like polite ghosts. Our conversations reduced to logistical updates. Did you pay the electricity bill? I'll be late tomorrow, parent-teacher conferences. Don't forget to pick up Liam's prescription. Our marriage had become a beautifully managed nonprofit organization, dedicated to the upkeep of a life, with all the passion of a quarterly budget report. Mark was a good man. I have to say that, because it's true. He was a provider, a steadfast father to our two children, a man who remembered to have the oil changed in my car, and who never once raised his voice in anger. But the man I fell in love with, the one who would pull me into a spontaneous dance in the kitchen or, quote, silly movie lines until I cried with laughter, had slowly receded, replaced by a responsible, slightly distant executive. He was solving problems, building spreadsheets, managing his team at work, and somehow, our family became another project to be managed. I felt like a prized asset in his portfolio, well-maintained, valuable, but ultimately, just part of the holdings. I was lonely. It's a cliché, I know, the lonely wife in the big house. But clichés exist for a reason. Then, there was Daniel. He was a new client at the interior design firm I worked for part-time. He had just moved back to town and needed help furnishing a modern, minimalist apartment. From our first meeting, the energy was different. He saw me, not just Sarah, the wife, the mother. He saw the woman who had an opinion on mid-century modern versus Scandinavian design, who could debate the merits of a sectional sofa with genuine passion. He asked me questions about myself, about what I wanted, about my dreams, and he actually listened to the answers. His attention was a warm, bright light, and I, who had been shivering in the cold shade of neglect for so long, instinctively moved towards it. Our interactions started professionally, then became friendly lunches to discuss fabric swatches, and then evolved into long, meandering text conversations that lasted long into the night. With Daniel, I remembered what it felt like to be exciting, to be someone whose thoughts were fascinating. It was a drug, and I was a willing addict. I told myself it was harmless, just a friendship that filled a void. I was lying to myself, of course, but it was a lie I desperately needed to believe. The affair, when it began, wasn't a dramatic, passionate explosion. It was a quiet, terrible step over a line I never thought I'd cross. A lingering hug after he dropped me back at my car that turned into a kiss. It was a secret. It was wrong. I knew it with every fiber of my being, and yet, the guilt was somehow less powerful than the crushing weight of the loneliness I felt at home. I became a master of deception. I deleted text messages. I invented meetings with a difficult client. I learned to look Mark directly in the eye and fabricate a story, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He never suspected a thing. His trust in me was absolute, a fortress I was betraying from within. I started to notice small changes in myself at home. I was quicker to criticize Mark, picking fights over trivial things, a dish left in the sink, a forgotten gallon of milk. I was building a case against him in my head, compiling a list of his faults to justify my own terrible behavior. I became short-tempered with our children, then overwhelmed with guilt, and would smother them with affection. I was a pendulum swinging wildly between resentment and self-loathing. My life became a meticulously curated performance, and the strain was beginning to show in the cracks around my eyes, in the forced lightness of my voice. One evening, Mark was working late or so, I thought. I was in the living room, texting Daniel, a small, secret smile on my face, when I heard Mark's key in the door. I fumbled with my phone, locking it and shoving it under a cushion as if it were on fire. He came in, looking tired, his shoulders slumped. He didn't come to kiss me hello. He just stood there for a moment, looking at me, and his gaze felt different. It wasn't distant or preoccupied. It was focused, sharp. "Rough day?" I asked, my voice a little too high. He didn't answer right away. He just kept looking at me, and for a terrifying second, I was sure he knew. He could see the deceit written on my skin. But then he blinked, and the moment passed. "Yeah," he said, his voice flat. "Just a long one. I'm going to take a shower." He walked away, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I retrieved my phone, my hands trembling. That was the first time I felt a cold trickle of fear. It wasn't the fear of getting caught. It was the fear that the man I had underestimated, the man I thought was too buried in his spreadsheets to notice, was perhaps seeing everything clearly for the very first time. But I brushed it aside. I was too deep in my own delusion, too addicted to the light Daniel offered, to see the storm that was gathering on my own horizon. The revenge, you see, had already begun. It just didn't look like anything I would have recognized. It looked like silence. It looked like patience. It looked like my husband, finally starting to pay attention. The cold trickle of fear I felt that evening didn't go away. It seeped into the foundations of my life. A slow, persistent leak. Things began to shift in almost imperceptible ways. Mark started coming home earlier. He didn't suddenly become the doting, attentive husband that would have been too obvious, too easy to dismiss. Instead, his presence became more substantial. He was just there, more often, a quiet, observant monument in the rooms of our house. He began to ask different kinds of questions. Not, "What's for dinner?" but, "How did that project with your new client go?" "Daniel, was it?" He said the name so casually, so cleanly, that it sucked the air right out of my lungs. My rehearsed lies felt thick and clumsy on my tongue. "It's fine, almost finished." He'd just nod, his eyes holding mine for a beat too long before returning to his book. Then, the little things started happening. My favorite perfume, a bottle I kept on my dresser, went missing for 2 days before reappearing in the exact same spot. When I mentioned it, Mark looked up from his laptop, his expression blank. "That's odd. Maybe one of the kids was playing with it." But our daughter was 10 and our son was 7. They had long passed the age of playing with my perfume. My laptop, which I always left charging on the kitchen counter, would sometimes be on the dining table when I came down in the morning. The password was still required, but it felt moved. When I asked Mark if he'd used it, he said, "No, why would I? You know I have my own." He then smiled, a small, tight thing that didn't reach his eyes. "Unless you have something on there you don't want me to see." He laughed as if it were a joke, but the sound was hollow, and it landed in the pit of my stomach like a stone. I became a prisoner in my own home, and my jailer was my own guilt. Every casual question felt like an interrogation. Every silent moment felt accusatory. I started double-checking everything. I deleted every text from Daniel immediately after reading it. I used a separate hidden app for our calls. The affair, which had once been a thrilling escape, became a second, more exhausting job. The weight of the secret was crushing me, and the joy I had found with Daniel was now poisoned with a constant, low-grade terror. I began to see a new side of Mark, a side I never knew existed. He had always been direct, a problem solver. Now, he was subtle, strategic. He started making small, positive changes that felt like subtle criticisms of my complaints. I'd once nagged him about never helping with the laundry. He suddenly started doing it, folding the clothes with a meticulous precision that my haphazard bundles never achieved. I'd complained he was always on his phone. He began leaving it in another room, and would instead watch me, his gaze calm and unnerving. He was mirroring back to me the perfect, attentive husband I had always claimed I wanted. But it felt like a performance, a flawless imitation designed to highlight my own flaws. The breaking point, the moment the facade truly cracked, was on a Tuesday. I was supposed to be at a design conference in the city. It was a lie, of course. I was with Daniel at his apartment. We had a fight, our first real one. He was getting impatient, wanting more of me, pushing for a future I knew was impossible. I left his place feeling drained and miserable, the illusion of our romance shattered by the harsh reality of my situation. I came home hours early, my head throbbing, hoping to slip upstairs and hide my despair in a shower. But Mark was there, waiting in the living room. He wasn't working. He was just sitting in his armchair, a single lamp on, a book open but unread in his lap. "You're home early," he said, his voice even. The conference was underwhelming. I mumbled, unable to look at him. "I'm sure it was," he replied. There was a weight to his words. He stood up and walked over to the mantelpiece, picking up a small, framed photo of us on our honeymoon. "Do you remember this? In Santorini? You said the light was so perfect, it felt like we were inside a dream." My throat tightened. "I remember." He put the photo down carefully, precisely. "I was thinking today," he said, turning to face me, "about trust. It's a funny thing. It's the foundation of everything, isn't it? A marriage, a family, a life. But it's so fragile. One crack, and the whole structure becomes unstable." He took a step toward me. "You spend years, decades, building it, and it can be destroyed in a single moment of weakness." I felt the blood drain from my face. He knew. He absolutely knew. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a statement. But he wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusing. He was calm, terrifyingly calm, like a surgeon assessing a patient before making the first, decisive cut. "Mark," I whispered, my voice trembling. He held up a hand, stopping me. "I don't want to hear it, Sarah. Not yet." He gave me that same small, humorless smile. "I'm just thinking out loud. You look tired. You should get some rest." He walked past me and up the stairs, leaving me standing alone in the dimly lit room. I stood there, frozen, the silence of the house pressing in on me from all sides. This was his revenge. Not a confrontation, not a dramatic scene. It was the dismantling of my reality, brick by brick. He was making me live in the gilded cage of my own deceit, forcing me to see the destruction I had wrought through the cool, clear lens of his calm. He was showing me that he held all the power, and he was in no hurry to use it. The waiting, the not knowing what he would do or when he would do it, was its own exquisite form of torture. The game was on, and I had just realized I never knew the rules, and my opponent was a master. The final act didn't begin with a bang, but with a stack of neatly printed papers placed on the kitchen island next to a fresh pot of coffee. It was a Saturday morning. The children were at my mother's for the weekend, a plan Mark had suggested with convincing casualness weeks ago. The sun streamed into the spotless kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, and the document's title was stark and simple: Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. I stood there, frozen, in my robe. He was already dressed, sipping his coffee, looking out at the backyard as if it were any other day. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. "It's all there, Sarah," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "I think you'll find the terms are comprehensive." My hands trembled as I picked up the papers. I skimmed through the legalese, my heart hammering, until I found the sections that mattered. Custody, assets, support. The world began to tilt on its axis. He was seeking full physical and legal custody of the children, citing my unstable and secretive behavior and questionable moral character. He was asking for the house, for a disproportionate share of our assets. It was brutal. It was a dismantling of my entire life. "You can't be serious," I whispered, the pages rustling in my unsteady hands. "Mark, the children. You can't take my children." He finally turned to face me. There was no anger in his eyes, no hatred. There was only a cold, terrifying finality. "I'm not taking them, Sarah. I'm protecting them. And I have everything I need to make sure the court agrees." He picked up a small, sleek digital recorder from the counter and pressed play. My own voice, tinny but clear, filled the room. "I know, Daniel. I hate lying to him, too, but he's just so oblivious. He's so buried in his own world, he wouldn't notice if I danced naked on the dining table." I heard my laugh, a cruel, tinkling sound. He's a good provider, I'll give him that. A reliable, boring, good man. But he doesn't see me. Not like you do. He stopped the recording. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I felt sick. He had been recording me in my own home. How long? How many conversations had he captured? "That's just the beginning," he said, his voice still eerily placid. I have financial records, Sarah. All the cash withdrawals you made for your long lunches and hotel rooms. I have GPS data from your phone placing you at his apartment on 17 separate occasions, including times when you told me you were volunteering at the shelter. I have statements from a private investigator with photographs. It's a mountain of evidence. Airtight. I slumped into a chair, the strength gone from my legs. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a corporate takeover. He had gathered his data, built his case, and was now executing his strategy with flawless, merciless precision. Why? I choked out, tears streaming down my face. Why are you doing it like this? Why didn't you just confront me? He gave me a look that was almost pitying. Confrontation is for people who are surprised. I wasn't surprised, Sarah. I was disappointed. And then I was resolved. He took a sip of his coffee. You thought I was oblivious. You thought you were so clever playing your little games. You underestimated me. You reduced me to a caricature, the boring, neglectful husband. So, I decided to show you exactly what that man was capable of. He walked over to the table and sat down across from me, folding his hands. You wanted excitement? You wanted to feel seen? Well, now you have my undivided attention. Every detail of your betrayal, I have seen. I have documented it. I have weaponized it. He laid out his terms. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. If I contested the divorce, if I fought him for custody, he would release the entire sordid file to the court. He would make sure my parents, our friends, our children when they were older, knew the full detailed extent of my affair. He would paint me as an unfit mother who prioritized her illicit rendezvous over her family. But, he said, his voice softening into something even more terrifying, if I agreed to his terms, if I signed the papers as they were, granted him the custody and assets he asked for, and walked away quietly, he would keep the specifics private. The divorce would proceed on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. I would get limited, supervised visitation with the children until a therapist deemed it appropriate for more. I would be free to be with Daniel. That's what you wanted, isn't it? He asked. And for the first time, a flicker of something sharp and painful showed in his eyes. Your freedom? I was utterly broken. He had thought of everything. He had backed me into a corner with no escape. My revenge was not a dramatic scene or a public shaming. It was a life sentence. It was losing the daily lives of my children, their laughter in the mornings, their bedtime stories. It was losing the home I had built. It was being forced to admit, in the most concrete way possible, that I had been not just unfaithful, but stupid. I had gambled with my entire life and lost to a superior player. I signed the papers. What choice did I have? The last time I saw him as my husband was the day I moved out. He was helping me carry a box to my car, a small, rented sedan that was a stark contrast to the family SUV I used to drive. He was still calm, still in control. I want you to know one thing, Sarah, he said, stopping me as I opened the car door. I never stopped loving you. Even when I was gathering every piece of evidence against you, a part of me was hoping I was wrong. That's what made this so necessary. He turned and walked back toward our house, his house, now without a backward glance. He didn't slam the door. He closed it softly, firmly, the way you close a book you have just finished reading. I got into my car and drove away from my life. The affair with Daniel had already fizzled out, unable to survive the harsh light of reality and the weight of my grief. He was part of the fantasy, and the fantasy was over. My revenge is my life now. It's the quiet apartment I can't afford. It's the scheduled, supervised visits with my children, who are confused and distant. It's the pitying looks from my mother, who doesn't know the whole story but knows I'm the one who left. It's the knowledge that Mark, the good, reliable, boring man, outmaneuvered me so completely that he didn't just end our marriage. He rewrote its history and dictated its future. He is the hero who protected his children. I am the cautionary tale who walked away. And the worst part, the truly exquisite punishment, is that he was right. He saw me. In the end, he saw every pathetic, selfish, deceitful part of me. And he held up a mirror so I could see it too. And I have to live with the reflection every single day for the rest of my life.